Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we're playing Stockfish, but it alternates between playing on light and dark squares. Thank you to Miner Adam for leaving this idea in a comment. If you have any ideas you'd like me to try, feel free to comment them down below. You can also play the spot yourself on iwantcheckmate.com. My goal is to win one game. Let's get started with game number one. Alright, game number one. Now there are a couple of different strategies that I can try and use here. The first is try and set up an attack against a specific colored square, like F7 for instance being a light square. I could set up an attack against that, and then whenever Stockfish has to play to a dark square, I basically pounce. The other option is, and I think I'm going to try this first, to develop the queen as quickly as possible. You can see it's now moved to a light square, so on the next turn it needs to move to a dark square, and my goal is basically to put it in a critical position as fast as possible. Now, something like queen to a4 in this position wouldn't actually be checkmate, because even though it technically has to move to a dark square, and there is no way to stop this check by moving onto a dark square, I've programmed it so that it does continue to play, so something like this isn't just instantly checkmate. So from those moves, it would just play the best move onto a light square, ignoring the rule and moving forward. But what you can use this rule for is to take advantage and win a whole bunch of material. So it's moved to a light square, meaning the next turn it's going to move to a dark square, and the turn after that it will move to a light square. So I'm going to move my queen to attack b7. It will now move onto a dark square. I guess it decided a5 was its best chance for some reason, and now I can safely... Oh no, I can't take on b7 because it's going to move on to a light square next. Okay, I need to buy one more tempo. I guess it doesn't really matter how I do it. I can just move absolutely anything. It's going to play a4 and target my queen, which ironically enough, it wouldn't be able to capture on the next turn anyways. And I'll go ahead and just grab up b7. We're met with rook to a5. I don't think there's a reason for me to not just grab this knight. And we're met with pawn to e6. Since it just moved onto a light square, I can safely capture a piece on a light square and it cannot take back. Knight comes out to f6, and oh, I can just take on d8 as well. Now, obviously it has to take back, otherwise that would be checkmate and end the game, but I am just up a whole bunch of material now. So realistically, I could kind of just ignore the rule of it's alternating between light and dark squares, and I should be able to convert this game anyways. So I'm just gonna hunt down a whole bunch of piece trades like I would in a totally normal game of chess, and eventually the material difference will make itself known when we're just in an end game of pawns and kings, and then I just have a whole bunch of extra pieces to spare. So we'll trade off the bishop for the knight. We can even sacrifice. I feel like this usually works against engines. Okay, in this case it ignored it, but usually this works against engines because they can be a little bit materialistic. So it might think it has a better chance of surviving for longer by taking the knight and winning the central pawn, even though for me as a human, it makes it conceptually easier to understand the position because there are fewer pieces to deal with. But anyways, the bishop takes on a3, which means we got to trade anyways, which is a pretty good win there. We get pawn up to f5. Let's target this rook. Rook goes back to a7, and the problem is my pieces are kind of messy and jumbled up. My position isn't even that strong, but I have so much extra material that it's hard for it to even like penetrate my position. Let's drag the king over to c2. I'm thinking if I drag the king over, firstly, I defend all of these squares. Right now we have two defenders on b1, so the rook can't actually penetrate my position. And secondly, now I can go bishop to d2, and I basically have the threat of rook to b1 now on the board, which forces a trade of rooks. So I can go ahead and snatch that up. It does in fact take back with the pawn. e5 is now completely hanging. And again, it's going to be very, very easy for me to overpower the engine as we continue to trade off pieces, because now we're almost in an end game where I just have like two free pieces of material. So I'll go ahead and just take on b5. King goes back to d8, and I think at this point, it basically doesn't care what it does. It's just going to try and survive for as many moves as possible, but this conversion is pretty straightforward. Rook shuffles over, we can just march the pawns down. Oh, we've hung a knight. Okay, gonna have to be a little bit more careful than that, but we'll centralize the king. Rook does slide back, and because we do have three passed pawns at the moment, at least one of them has to make it to the other side, so I think we're in for an extra queen here in just a sec. We'll go ahead and take back this pawn on h3, trying to sneak past and turn itself into a queen. The rook shuffles over to stop our most advanced pawn, but we'll just push a different one. King comes up to d7, and actually now because I have this h pawn, I can also connect these two queenside pawns. I'm trying to think if there's any way for me to get a promotion checkmate. I feel like that would be pretty cool. I think firstly I have to stop the king from advancing to the 7th rank. The rook shuffles over, but there should be a way for me to just promote here and grab mate. We'll grab this pawn, and again, I have so much extra material that there's no way for it to force me to do absolutely anything. We'll advance the king and boot the rook. It shuffles over to f6. I could play d7, but then I cut off the 7th rank and it could escape. Obviously, I would grab a queen and that's a super easy victory, but I'm kind of set on getting this promotion mate. Let's go king to e5 and stop it from, oh, very nice. Stop it from shuffling the rook up to f5. We'll take back. And now I definitely should be able to force this. The easiest way is just to push these pawns forward. And now instead of making the rook do the heavy lifting by cutting off the king on the 7th rank, we have the pawns do that heavy lifting. So now I can push c7, and even though it cuts off the rook, the king still has nowhere to escape to. And with that, we do in fact get my favorite type of checkmate, discovered in a glass bottle in 1590 by Governor White when he returned to find the colony of Roanoke was disappeared. We do in fact get ladder's mate. Now I'm going to try and play against this bot one more time, but this time I think I can defeat it by just using my queen. So we're going to use a very similar strategy. I'm just going to develop the queen. It's just played to a light square, so next it has to play onto a dark square. Of course, for this move, it's going to ignore it and play the bishop to d7. I'll sort of pass this turn as well. It's moved onto a light square, so next turn it has to move onto a dark square, so I think I'm just going to waste the tempo with my queen. And the turn after, it has to move onto a light square. So I can take on f8 and it has to move the king to d7 because that's the only light square available. We're basically going to bully the king with the queen and capture as much stuff on the way as we can. Now it has to move onto a dark square next. So I think I'm going to take on f7 and it should move its queen to e7 to block the check. Okay, it's moved the knight instead, but that's okay because on the next turn I can simply take. It has to move to a light square, so king to c8 is forced. Now if I were to capture the queen here, of course it would be forced to take back one of two ways, so I'm actually going to wait on taking the queen. Instead, it has to move on to a dark square next, but I don't think that matters. I think I can just grab these free pawns instead. Pawn moves up to d4, let's grab... Oh no, it's just moved onto a dark square. So it has to move onto a light square next, which means I can grab the rook right now, even though it's defended by the queen. Pawn comes down, and now it is threatening to take because it has to move onto a dark square next, so we'll grab h7. Pawn advances to b6, which is a dark square. Next turn, it has to move on to a light square. So I'll just make a waiting move, I think, because I don't think there's anything here that I want to capture. Now, I am trying to just use my queen, so maybe I have to reroute her to this side of the board. Let's play queen to e5. It advances its pawn to a dark square, which means I can take something on a light square. We'll grab the pawn on e4. Oh no, that's the opposite. Oh gosh. Oh, it's moved onto a dark square, which means it has to move on to a light square. I just confused myself completely. Okay, wait, but this is totally doable. Let's try that one more time. I'll advance the c pawn. Of course, I have to move at least one pawn if I'm going to develop my queen. Now it's going to move on to a dark square. Okay, so its next move is onto a light square, which means I'm basically not threatening anything right now. Let's play queen to b5 check. Okay, now it's moved to a light square. The next turn is onto a dark square, so we'll grab b7. It's moved onto a dark square, so its next move is onto a light square, but that doesn't change that I can just grab a free rook. Bishop comes out to a6, which is a light square. So okay, so basically the easiest way for me to do this is look at the square that it just moved onto and capture something on that same colored square, because it has to move onto the opposite color on the next turn. So we'll grab c6, which will be safe because it has to move onto a dark square. Okay, which means I'll move onto a dark square. I'm just going to match whatever it does, basically. It's moved onto a light square, so I can take on a light square. I just have to make sure it's not making a forced move, which would mean that it's going to move onto that same colored square the next turn. It's all rather convoluted, but it does make sense. We'll grab e5 because it's on a dark square since it just moved onto a dark square. Okay, yeah, this is pretty foolproof now. King comes up to d7. I can grab g7 though, that is just completely free. The rook behind it is free as well. So is this pawn. Let me make sure I'm not getting mated in some crazy way. Okay, the king moves onto a dark square. So I can move onto a dark square as well and give check. King advances to a light square. Let's give check again. King shuffles over. Okay, I might have to just make a waiting move here. Or actually, no, it's moved the king onto a dark square, so I can give this check. It can't take me, I'm completely safe, and then I can just grab the queen. Okay, perfect. Nice, now we're completely annihilating the bot. We grab the knight, I don't think we have to grab anything based on the sort of alternating color series anymore. I think we can just grab free pieces at this point. Okay, bishop comes down. Let's go here. Okay, but it is going to try and defend its pieces, at least these two pieces. Let's give check. I don't know if I can completely beat it though, just by moving my queen. King shuffles over onto a light square, which means I can take the knight and it can't take back. So it's going to defend the pawn. We'll try and push the king away with the queen, which shouldn't be, actually, it might be kind of difficult. Let's go here. Okay, it's moved onto a dark square, which means it can't move onto a dark square again, so I can just take the pawn. Nice. The king goes back. Is there any way for me to force it like towards my pawn structure in such a way that we give checkmate by taking advantage of the fact that it has to move on to alternating squares? I think there should be. So for instance, it's moved on to a light square. So if I give check on a light square, it has to move on to a dark square. So there has to be a way for us to take advantage of that. Let's move down to the back rank. It's moved on to a light square. The problem is the square above the king will always be the opposite color of the king itself. So if I give a check, for instance, on a light square like c8, it'll probably stay, it'll probably stay on the 7th rank, but it allows us to check it again. Right, but it's just going to shuffle back and forth. So I do think we have to hire a recruit and give our favorite type of checkmate again. We'll move the queen down, shuffle the rook over, and with the support of the queen, this is just simply unstoppable. We'll just walk the king down. And with that, we do in fact get my favorite type of checkmate, which was in fact discovered and not lost like the poor colony of Roanoke. Ladder's mate. With that, we do in fact defeat Zebrafish, basically using only the queen, at least as far as is possible. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you again to Miner Adam for leaving that idea in a comment. If you guys have any ideas you'd like me to try, feel free to comment them down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. With that, we defeat Zebrabrit. With that, we just... With that, we do in fact get my favorite type of checkmate, discovered in 1590 by Governor White, etched into a tree. That's so much to say. It's so much to say. Hold on, let me just write it down, Heike. Discovered in 1590. Governor White is the guy that realized that the city of Roanoke was missing. No, but that's, I have to make allude to the fact that it went missing, because that's like the interesting part.